Hello and welcome to another edition of The Stew with JT Brew. I'm your host, Justin Taylor, alongside my co-host, Bryan Toast Clark. We are bringing you another edition of NHL Around the Ice. In this episode, we are going to go over the Central Division, a little mock draft action, kind of decide where we like guys, who we would take before somewhere else. So stick with us. You're in The Stew.
You up on trades and why you move, you ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release, we started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sipping through, sifting through the statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to The Stew with JT Brew.
I hope everybody out there had a great Christmas holiday coming up on New Year's. I've been fighting a little bit of a cold, little sickness in my family the whole time, so I'm going to do my best to get through this episode. Try not to cough in the mic, just getting over the flu. But I'm happy to be here, Toast. We did something a little crazy this week, just kind of mixing it up. We are doing a Central Division redraft style, just kind of looking at values, who we like. So me and Toast sat down, 23-man rosters, took just the Central Division of the Western Conference. We want to do a 23-man roster, built 4 lines, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies, 4 bench spots. I received the first pick. Toast followed up and kind of went back and forth from there. As we go in here, I'll talk about kind of what we're talking about. We're thinking about, standard scoring, looking at this as value going forward, remainder of this season, not where we would have taken these guys at the beginning of the year, but where we would take them now. 4 points per goal, 2 points per assist, shorthanded goals are 2, an extra 2. Game-winning goals, an extra 1, hits 0.25, blocks 0.25, goalie wins 3, saves 0.1, and goals allowed 0.5. So going over the Central Division consists of Arizona, Chicago, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, Nashville, St. Louis, and Winnipeg. We ignored kind of like the minor injuries that might be happening to guys right now. Big injuries, obviously you've got to take those into account, but we try to ignore the small stuff here as we went through. Toast, kind of what do you think about this process before we start breaking down players?
I really love having it's not quite mid-season yet, JT, with the NHL, but we're getting there. We're pretty darn close. Everybody's really wanting to know now is, should I take a real good look at my roster? Do I need to turn it over a little bit? And kind of like I did in our home league a couple weeks ago. Do we need to put some guys up for trade? And what we hope to do is look at and give our opinion on each one of these divisions moving forward in the next 3 weeks after we do this one, and we can cover the entire NHL in a month span. And usually that ends up being about the time where trade deadlines come up. You're usually looking at somewhere around the end of January on most leagues. So hopefully we can align it right and give our listeners a little bit of advice and a little bit of our takes on specifically who we like moving forward.
Yeah, I'll pull up. We'll kind of pull up for the people watching on YouTube. We'll pull up kind of the draft picks back and forth that we had. We'll explain it to everybody who's listening. On a podcast without video, any of that stuff. So we'll kind of keep updating guys as we go throughout, so that you're kind of know where we're standing and where we're at. So Toast, let's jump in here. Let me pull up the board of kind of what we went through and kind of back and forth here. Some of these picks we made on our own. Some of these picks we discussed a little bit, decide who we thought would be the next guy to go in that area. As we didn't do this, it's kind of like, this wasn't a whole head-to-head. I got to beat you in this draft. We were kind of looking at, hey, who do we take? What are we liking the values here? So let's start off here and tell the folks kind of how we got this thing started.
Yeah. So, right now, if again, JT said, if you are watching on video, if you're actually watching on YouTube, this could be pretty helpful. If not, we'll do the best we can to, explain for the handler specifically what we're actually showing, what we're seeing, what we're discussing. But we really, again, broke these down into creating a team. We really want to say, let's build the best 23-man roster we can, 2 of them, one for JT, one for me, in one division. And we do take positions into account when we when we discuss each one of these lines. So 4 running lines, just like you would in the NHL. You got 3 defenseman pairings, so 6 defensemen altogether. You got 2 goalies, a starter and a backup, and then you got 3 bench spots that rounds up your 23-man roster. So what JT and I will do is JT will maybe reveal who he picked in the first round, who I picked in the first round, and we may discuss some rounds more than others, and some rounds we may not discuss at all. But what we really want to do is go through here and maybe pick out some players that are like, you know what, based on where we actually drafted them, I like the value, and I like this player moving forward because of A, B, and C.
Yeah, I started off this thing, pretty classic. The guy you would think would go center one, Nathan McKinnon, my guy from Colorado. Absolute stud. Guy is on a scoring streak like no other for the Avs right now. I think he's got a team record currently. If at least he had one recently. I'm a little behind. Like I said, I've been sick for the last week, so I'm slightly behind on a few of these things. But guy's been on fire. To me, he was clear cut pick number one.
Yeah, easy pick there, JT, and I believe you're referring to his 18 game in a row home point streak.
Yes, that's correct.
He's setting all kinds of Colorado records. And then you go back to when they were the Quebec Nordiques and stuff. So that's a long time franchise there. And of course, he may be the best that ever's actually wore that jersey. An easy number one. I come back with my first line right wing, and I pick Mikko Rantanen, his Batman to the Robin. And really the main reason why I picked Rantanen, 2 reasons. One, because I believe he is the clear cut number 2 here, but also 2, I wanted you to be able to avoid that stack. I did not want you actually to be able to stack those 2 together on a top line. So when I knew you would take McKinnon, it was an easy pick for me taking Rantanen.
Yeah, coming back to me in my second round, the injury had me a little worried, but we tried to not take injuries into gigantic, value wise here. Kyle Connor for Winnipeg, he's my guy. I've got him on a ton of leagues. He's my keeper or home league for a long time. Until the injury here recently, he was off to a fire start this season. He's a guy on that left wing. I just really like him. I think he's a guy that is really playing well. Hopefully comes back from that knee injury a little sooner rather than later.
Yeah, great pick there, JT. And Connor would have been my pick as well. But normally, if this was a draft in the very beginning, I would have actually selected the guy I selected. But nevertheless, I did select him at my second round pick, Kirill Kaprizov from Minnesota. Now, what I'll say about Kaprizov is he's starting to get it going. They're starting in the last 3-4 games. He has looked like himself. So that was another reason why I'm like, you know what? He has the highest upside of anybody on the board. He's a guy that scores 45 goals a year. Is still a fairly young Russian player. So he's had some hot and cold spurts throughout his career. But for me, he was a clear cut number 2. So I took him to play on the opposite wing as Rantanen. On line 1, Kaprizov will be my top left wing.
Yeah, for number third round here, I had Forsberg from Nashville Predators as my line 2 wing, my left winger. So I jumped on him with my pick there in the third.
Yeah, and I decided to go ahead and come back and round out my my top line. And you're going to see that as this draft goes on, I really put an emphasis on centers. Whether that worked out for me or not, I'm not quite sure. But I really wanted to be able to drive play with all 4 lines, to be able to actually have 4 really, really good players that actually touch the puck and actually distribute, get a lot of assists. So I went ahead and followed up with my center one is Mark Scheifele, who was probably ADP of probably closer to 90 or 100 in a lot of leagues before the start of the season. So there's a lot of people still left on the board. And that'll kind of transition back to JT. On JT, you got pretty good value coming back to you with your 4th round pick as a result.
Yeah, I was pretty happy to get Robertson in the 4th round out of Dallas. That center, he's my center 2 behind McKinnon. Really like him. I still think he's a guy that was highly drafted this year. Often kind of a slow start for him, but man, I was really happy to get him in the 4th.
Yeah, that whole Dallas team's picking it up. They're so good. They're such a balanced team. We talked about this before on a previous podcast. I just believe that they're going to pick it up. They're way too good, and you're slowly seeing that Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski line starting to kind of get points where they're all three scoring at one time, and I think that's going to continue. I went ahead and again after I got Shifley, so I got Kaprizov, Shifley, and Rantanen as my first line. I started on my second line, and I went ahead. I wanted to win a team. I know I got Bedard, and I do think Bedard. He's right now I think at 31 points in 34 games. For a rookie, that's unbelievable. But I wanted to go ahead and win the Chicago team because after him, there's really nobody else. So I went ahead and got Connor Bedard as my second line center behind Shifley centering line one.
Yeah, and I like that pick. I knew you were going to take him. It just was a question of when. Obviously, in a dynasty, he would have been one of the first guys off the board. But this being a season-long redraft, even though it is season-long, him being a rookie, he has been off to a great start this year. So, he is a total play in even redraft leagues. So that's a great pick in the fourth. I came back in the fifth. Decided to go defense. Maybe was a slight early, but I like Makar from Colorado. I thought with the fifth, I wanted the top defensive guy I felt, and going with McKinnon on my top line. So I like Makar, so I went with him in the fifth.
Yeah, JT, that would have been the 9th overall pick in this two-man draft here. Makar was going well before number 9 overall in majority of drafts. So as of now, right now, it's just simply it's injury, right? It's health every single time. But if he ends up being healthy moving forward, that would be the pick of this draft. That would be the steal of this draft, getting him in the 5th round. As a result, I went ahead and again, you can kind of see what I decided I was going to do. I was going to go heavy with the centers. So I went with Shifley as my center 1, Bedard with my center 2, and Eriksson Ek as my center 3. I want to go ahead and stack him and Kaprizov. So I got my first stack there. Eriksson Ek had a really, really good start the third way through the season here. Tons of shots on goal. And I believe he's got somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 14 goals. I like what I see of Eriksson Ek. And again, I think Minnesota's now just getting started. I think they're going to be pretty darn good. So I was pretty happy to get him to be my third line center.
Yeah, and then I came back with Keller from Arizona in the 6th round as my left wing, right wing. I kind of wanted to experience there. Arizona is played better than a lot of people thought they would be. He's a guy, long term, you probably don't want him in a dynasty league, but he's a guy who's going to give you some years still. I was between him and Kyrou from St. Louis as my right winger. I needed a right winger in there. I didn't have a guy on my top line. It kind of was a coin flip for me between those two guys, and I ended up going with Keller, a little more experience.
Yeah, JT, maybe we'll pull off a trade, so I really do like Keller a lot. Keller, best hockey's ahead of them. They've produced really, really well as a team. I came back again, and I'm going to my 4th line center. Again, I'm loading up on centers, Rupe Hentz. So now I kind of again wanted to go ahead and block JT. He's got Robertson, and I went ahead and got Hentz at this point. And I just really like being strong up the middle. And again, I believe Dallas is going to get it going at top line.
Yeah, I would have went with Hintz if he was still there. So that was a great pick for you going there. So I came back. I still went with the Dallas stack, but just instead of doing Hintz and Robertson, I went Pavelski. So I got him with Robertson for Dallas as my second team right wing.
Perfect. Yeah, and so I came back to play on Bedard's right on line 2, Jordan Kyrou for the St. Louis Blues. Kyrou has now started to get it going. He I would say emotionally fell apart over the last couple of weeks in the media. We saw the guy in tears. They ended up making a coaching change, but in the last week and a half, he's got the deployment he needs, he's got the ice time he needs, and now he's starting to respond. And I really, really like Kyrou moving forward. And that's hard for me to say considering it's a St. Louis and I'm a Chicago fan, but nevertheless, to have a line of Bedard at center and right wing Kyrou as well, after having Kaprizov, Shifley, and Rantanen, I really, really liked the way my first 2 lines were shaping up.
So I took the first defenseman off the board. Then I went a little crazy here, and I went with first goalie as well. Hellebuck from Winnipeg. We talked about it in our mid-year fantasy awards. Who we liked. We thought he was probably number 1 as far as best goalie in the league. I liked him a ton. Uh, I was kind of between him and Einger. I went with Hellbuck here. I just think I wanted that advantage at goalie if I could get it.
Yeah, JT, you won the position. Now we act four good goalies here, right? Between I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
four obvious goalies, but nevertheless, Hellebuck, in our opinion, I know we had that like you said on the podcast before the prior episode. He's the best of the bunch, and I believe he's going to get the variety of the majority of the starts. So you're going to have volume. He's very very good, steady, like we said. So I think you won that position. In the eighth round, after JT took him, I came back and I got what I felt like was a pretty good steal. Valley Nichushkin. And I think Nichushkin, the biggest part was is we really thought that once Arturi Lehkonen comes back sometime in the near future, that will Nichushkin actually lose his deployment. I don't think he's going to. He's played too good. I believe he has somewhere in the neighborhood of like 16 goals, 17 assists, and he's a point per game player so far. And I was really, really happy to get him and Rantanen together on the same team so I could go ahead and stack those guys, especially on power play one. They're again for value like that on a team like Colorado. I was very happy to get Nichushkin in the eighth round.
Yep. Then I came back with Zuccarello from Minnesota as my third line right wing. Took him in the ninth round. Zuccarello from Minnesota.
Yeah, that's shaping up to be a pretty good third line. Whenever you get a guy like Zuccarello going line three, I mean, okay, he got some great value now. Again, it's only two of us drafting, but nevertheless, Zuccarello's been a little banged up. But again, just like we had said with Kaprizov, just like we said with Eck, we believe in Zuccarello as that other third piece there with that team. They're going to get it going. They're starting to pick it up. They're starting to look like more like themselves. After JT took Zuccarello in the ninth, I came back and decided I better get my first defenseman, and I get Roman Yossi. A lot of this was more so just grabbing a name when it comes to defensemen. He does a little bit of everything. Nobody really needs to go into detail about how good Yossi has been in his career, and really he's having Nashville in general. I think they've actually performed better than I thought they would. Forsberg has actually had a really, really good season. And guys like Smith and guys like Sissons have actually come on as well. And Yossi's actually been a part of that. So I really like what Nashville's doing. They made a concerted effort to overturn that roster big time and actually get faster in the offseason. They've done that.
Yeah, when you went the defensive route, I came back. I went defense. You kind of hit me. I was like, oh, I should maybe go back to the defensive well. So I did that as well. I'll pull that back up for you guys. Morrissey from Winnipeg, got him in the 10th. He's my second overall defender. My second first line guy to go with McCarr from Colorado, who I took earlier in the 5th.
Yeah, not even close. That is the best pairing in the Central Division. If you were to put together two defensemen, by far, not even close. You definitely won a defensive position, JT. I came back and got Robert Thomas, the center right wing for the St. Louis Blues, as my third line right winger to go and play on the right side of Eriksson Ek. Thomas is a guy who's going to give you a boatload of assists. And again, just kind of like Minnesota, kind of like Edmonton, they made a coaching change. And St. Louis has been better than expected. And honestly, the underlying numbers said they shouldn't be nearly as good as they are as a team, but they keep on actually putting together some wins. They're not that bad. And Robert Thomas kind of centers all of that. He's going to be in the mix. He's going to get a lot of peripherals. So really assist machine. He'll sneak in a goal there every once in a while. This late in the draft, I really like Thomas to be on the third line.
Yep, and then added my second Minnesota player. I added Boldy going as my left wing on my third line in the next round.
All right, JT, I'll have you bring that back up, and I'll take a
Yep,
look and
screen. Yep,
see.
and then
Yep,
I went build Boldy in the 11th, and you followed me up with Ellers, right?
Yep, got Ehlers there in the 11th. And Ehlers is a guy who, as soon as he was put with Perfetti, maybe about 3 weeks ago, Ehlers really started to take off, and his game is really starting to pick up. I can't tell you whether or not he's actually on power play one right now with the likes of Scheifele and Connor. My guess he is, considering the Connor injury. But nevertheless, since Connor got hurt, he has really stepped in and stepped up. Ehlers is making a pitch to make it really difficult on Winnipeg when Connor comes back for them to actually to lessen his deployment. He may end up just staying put where he's at, and he'll play alongside those guys.
Yeah, coming back here then in the 12th, I was debating, do I go goalie again and try to hammer the goalies? Looking back, maybe I do it if I think about it again with Ottinger. But I ended up going another Dallas player. I went Duchesne, kind of fill out my final player on my third line. I needed a third line center, so I went with him instead of Ottinger at goalie.
Yeah, and that Dallas second line, JT, with Duchesne and with Marchment and with Sagan, they've carried that team while the
Mhm.
first line is still trying to be figuring out. Matt Duchesne has had a great season for Matt Duchesne. And Duchesne has some great years in Nashville, but man, he's scoring even better now at Dallas than he did in Nashville. So great third line center pick. And you're right. I mean, 12th round and a 23 round draft. I hadn't taken a goal yet. I figured I better go get Ottinger. And so I did in the 12th round there as well to get my first goalie off the board. We value wins as much as we do at the goalie position. Dallas is going to get a ton of wins. I really like them long term throughout the entire season and into the playoffs as well. So Ottinger ended up being a pretty easy decision for me there to be my goalie number one.
Yep, and I was going to come back and take Ottinger after I took Duchesne. When you took him, I was like, okay, no messing around. I have to get my second goalie. So then I went Saros from Nashville, and we just basically went goalie heavy here these couple of rounds in a row.
Yeah. Again, Saros and Hellebuck, you got the team that with goalies that you got the I would say they're steady for one, but two. Sorry, the word eluded me. JT, volume. You've wrapped up volume starters there. I mean, so I decided to go ahead and come right back and get Alexander Georgiev for Colorado again, valuing wins. So again, I think that these are the four obvious goalies in the Central Division. That was going to be these combination of goalies. You just hope that each one of us at least got two of them, and it wasn't like 1-3 or 3-1. And luckily, we split them up.
Yeah, the coming back in the 14th round, you had already had a couple guys on your fourth line rolling. I had no fourth line forwards yet at all. So that's where I had to come through. Toast, you got to help me out. I always butcher his name from St. Louis.
Buchnevich.
Buchnevich. I always butcher his name, and I always got to rely on Toast to save me. So Buchnevich, left winger for St. Louis. They haven't had a lot of offensive firepower this year, but they've been in a lot more games lately. For the fourth line, I thought, not a ton of guys left. I liked him. I figured I was going to give him a shot as my left wing on my fourth line.
Yeah, Buchnevich was a guy that his ADP was way up there, JT. I'd say it's somewhere around 65 to 75 in a lot of leagues. And he really hasn't performed. He's probably performing in the mid 100s, so 150 to 175 there on overall scoring. Better days are ahead for Buchnevich. I mean, he's got to play better than what I don't believe he's just fell off a cliff. So to have him on line 4, great pick with 14th round. I come back, and this may have been a little bit of a head scratcher for some. And when I really hadn't filled out a whole lot of lines, and I'd only at this point got one defenseman, but I decided to take a bench player. I took Ryan O'Reilly for Nashville. O'Reilly is scoring a bunch, and again, I wanted to dominate the center position. This could end up being a trade chip for me, I would think, down the road. But O'Reilly is a guy that a lot of people should be targeting, especially in home leagues where you may end up having only 10 teams. O'Reilly may not be a guy who has a sexy name behind him, the longtime St. Louis Blue. Now with Nashville Predators, they're not known for a ton of scoring, but O'Reilly has been doing a ton of scoring this year. So if you're out there and you can kind of see O'Reilly either out there on your free agent board, or you could actually try to get him in a trade. O'Reilly may be a guy that you could actually sneak off in a trade because, again, it's not that household name you would think that you're just going to like, wow, he's going to set the fantasy world on fire. But he has been really, really good.
Yeah, and then the 15th round, after you took another center, I was like, "Ooh, I need my fourth line center." I came back with Schmaltz from Arizona in the 15th round. You followed me up with Faber from Minnesota as your second defenseman in the 15th round. And I came back in the 16th with, I was like, okay, time to keep adding defense. Went to my second defensive line with Dursey from Arizona in the 16th. And then you came back in the 16th with your guy from Chicago, Nick Foligno.
Yep. So got Nick Foligno there on line 4. He's really the second best Hawk, and it's not even close there. Figured
Mm-hmm.
again we would try to get one more player from that team And, just a guy to fill up the line for. On a real team, oh, I'd love to have Nick Foligno on a line 4. And even in fantasy, if I were actually putting together a 23-man roster just for this division like we're doing, Nick Foligno is just fine. He'll get you hits, he'll get you blocks. And, that's where we just kind of started throwing some darts here, JT. Throwing some darts here from
And
around
I
16
like
to
it. I mean,
23.
you're taking a guy. I mean, Blackhawks. You know what you're getting with them. They're a rebuild team, but anytime you can get, even on a bad team, if you can get the second best player on a bad team, you got to take the guy, especially when you get them late. So I thought that was a really good pick. I liked it a lot. So 17th coming back. You know me, Toast. If I can get solid defensive guys that are going to be in the mix, I'm going to go with them. I went Heiskanen from Dallas, 17th. I was super pumped to get him as my 4th guy. I didn't think I was going to get him 4th defender. But at this point, I was kind of looking. I was like, what is left? 4th line guys for my forwards, and what defensemen are left. And I was like, I like the value of defense at this point. I think I could get some better defensemen to kind of give me an advantage there. So that's where I moved there in the 17th.
I was really disappointed, and that's what I like to have back, JT. So not getting Heiskanen and allowing you to kind of load up on defense there. Heiskanen's a guy I could have actually had, and looking who I took in front of him with Faber, probably could have taken a Heiskanen there. I come back with Torrey Krug. At that point, again, I'm throwing darts. I'm looking for power play 1 defenseman at that point. Guys that are just going to score me a whole lot, assists mainly, maybe get a goal here every once in a while. And in the 17th, I took Krug. You came back, and again, we're saying defense. You took Devin Taves from Colorado. Again, to have your 3rd pair defenseman, Devin Taves, great defenseman there. I mean, and again, I come back in the 19th, and I don't really like defensemen at this point. I'm like, the wells went dry. I'm like, I can go ahead and maybe get some defensemen later on in the draft, and especially maybe some defensemen who hit and block a lot and don't worry about so much goals and assists. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and take Jamie Benn. I was a little surprised that Ben was still out there. Ben had that center left wing eligibility to get him in the 19th round. So to be 38th player in the entire division taken. Ben's pretty good. Ben's is a very good bench player that could definitely slide in there, especially if Ehlers were to fall off. He's going to probably split time or even maybe take more time from Nick Foligno on line 4. So I was pretty happy and lucky to be able to get Ben.
Yeah, I liked Ben there. I thought it was a really good pick. The thing with Ben, I feel like he's just one of those guys. He's been around the league so long. He's been so good. He's dropped off a bit, but he's still a really solid player. And I feel like he's just a forgotten name. I think people just forget about him in drafts, and I kind of forgot about him. But I also saw a couple of these defensive players I liked better, and I was like, ooh, I kind of like that guy. I kind of like that younger, sexier pick. So I kind of went with those guys. And then when you took Ben, I was like, oh, I totally forgot he was there. This is one of those things like those guys just kind of sit there and you're like, oh, wait. So you took him, got me snapped back in. I was like, hey, I got to get back to offense. I got to finish off that 3rd line. And me and you have talked about it a lot. You love him. And I was like, ooh, I got to get Toast Boy Perfetti from Winnipeg. Jumped on him, my 4th line right wing. He's been really good. He's backing up a little bit of my Connor with the injury, but he has been, I think, better than people thought he would be this year. And he's been really solid. I was like, at this point, it's worth a shot at it.
Yeah, I don't really know where Ehlers would actually be without Perfetti. And when Ehlers was struggling earlier in the season, before the Connor injury, it was Perfetti who actually helped Ehlers get back on his feet to really start performing the way we knew Ehlers could. So, I love Perfetti there on the 4th line. I mean, come on, 4th line, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. So then come back to you. I got him in the 19th round.
Yeah, go ahead and go your 20th,
Ben,
JT. Yeah, you go ahead and go to your 20th round.
Yep,
here.
yep.
Yeah.
So then I came back and I was like, hey, I was one defensive guy away from finishing the starting lineup. And I was like, might as well finish it off. Went to the Blackhawks. I didn't have any Chicago players on my team. I was like, Seth Jones is just sitting there. I was like, I'm going to add Seth Jones. Now, a salary cap league, something like that. But hey, in a redraft right now, this late, got to take him. Best defensive player on their team. I'm taking him. So I loved it. for Seth Jones as my sixth defenseman, finishing out my last defensive pairing. I loved it at 20.
Yeah, that's your six defensemen are really good. At that point, I'm in round 20, and I still need three defensemen. So I go three defensemen in a row, but I decide with I'm going to get Pionk and Lawson. And really, the reason I went both those guys is they hit and block a ton. I think Lawson's got over 130 hits so far. And he's just really bruising the crap out of a lot of people. And Pionk, we know what he can do as well. And Neil Pionk, in the event that there's an injury to Morrissey, he can slide into that power play one. And I believe he did some of that last year, why Morrissey was actually hurt a little bit there late in the season. Pionk can slide in there and did a really good job. And in the 22nd round, I went ahead and just got Thomas Harley. He's Dallas's up and coming defenseman, and Heiskanen has really been the one kind of struggling a little bit of late, and Harley's really been the one that's been picking up the pace a little bit. So I decided to go ahead and go with Pionk, Lawson, and Harley. JT, go ahead and walk through kind of who you took in the 21st, 22nd, 23rd round to kind of round out your draft.
Yeah, Pionk was probably the next guy I was taking behind Seth Jones for defenders. I've got him in my keeper home league. I like Pionk. He's been really solid this year. Been a tough player, so I thought that was a really good pick. I like that one a lot. So for me, at this point, I just need to kind of round things out. So I added Johnson from Dallas as a center, Shen from St. Louis in the 22nd as my center left wing, backup on my bench, and then Krause from Arizona in the 23rd as my left wing, right wing. I wanted a little bit of a guy that could play both positions, so kind of filled that out with those guys there, and I felt like really rounded out my lineup well there.
Yeah, I wish I would have taken Krause there because I come back at the end of draft. I take Marco Rossi, which was really, again, throwing a dart. Rossi's actually done he's been formidable there filling in while Zuccarello has actually been a little banged up, and he's got a little bit more opportunity. And Rossi's actually done very well, especially for a really young player. I believe he's only 21 or 22 years old. This is his first full season in the NHL. But I would imagine that I've been a little center heavy into this draft, so Rossi would probably be a player I would drop, and I'd probably go out there on the waiver wire to go ahead and pick up another left wing, right wing.
Well, hey, Toast, we'll bring us back up on screen for everybody can see us here. Let's talk a little bit about like strategy, your team compared to my team. I felt like my team was, I tried to go a little across the board, try to even things out, across the board, defense, centers, everything else. I tried to be maybe a little conservative, but I wanted the low floor. I wanted those guys. Kind of, where did you take your team?
Yeah, in the end, I kind of like your team a little bit better, and your philosophy, JT, probably worked out a little bit better than mine. I would say that you hit it on the head with your roster. You know what you're going to get out of your roster. It's pretty balanced. It's pretty safe. Lines 1 through 4 through the defensemen and goalies as well. My roster is high risk, high reward. There's lots of actually stacks in the roster as well, and it could be the weeks where okay, we may end up having a quiet week, and there could be weeks where I end up beating you and doubling you up and then outscoring you by 100. So it's again, if you're going to take a chance in a lot of leagues, and especially with your draft, sometimes you have to do that. You have to take those big stabs, especially if you know a lot of the players around you in the league that are really good. They're all going to be putting together a balanced lineup, and you're like, hey, it's going to be really difficult to win this league, let alone actually make the playoffs. You may take those stabs because then you can put those stacks together, and before you know it, man, you're like, I find myself in first place because I took a chance. So that's kind of what I did. My defense core is a little bit more bangers friendly. I get a lot of hits, a lot of blocks. Yours actually put the puck in the back of the net, get a lot of assists on the power play. My team, I drive play lines 1 through 4 to center play. Really deep defense or center play. I mean, got the Rupe Hentz is my fourth line center. I mean, so there you go. But all in all, I think our first two lines are very equal. They're looking pretty darn equal to one another. And then as we get to lines 3 and 4, I'm pretty good at the center. I like your wings a little bit better, but your defenseman and your bench really take it for you. So I would say that in the end, I kind of like what you've done. I like what I've done, but I like what you've done a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it really depends on league scoring and what we're doing. But I think my defense and my goalies really stand out on that end. But like you definitely have higher firepower. Your fourth line, your third line have a little more firepower than mine do. And like you said, you've got that high end. You're going to have some monster weeks. I've got a lower floor where I'm like, oh, I'm going to know what I'm getting from these guys most of the time. I feel like I'm going to have some good weeks, some big weeks, but I think I'm going to be pretty steady Eddie. Where, like you said, you've got a lot of guys that can really put in the net, but you're relying on those stacks. You need some big games from certain teams. So I love the two strategies, and that's what I always love about fantasy. And I always talk about that. I want to see people how they can look at things, how they can do different strategies, how they can build a team, because there's not one way to build a team. There's always a ton of different ways to build and win. And I think that's kind of the best part. And I like doing these mocks to kind of look at that, to kind of like reevaluate and go, okay, I can do it this way. I can do it that way. What way do I like better? In the end. And sometimes it just depends on the league you're in. Sometimes it makes more sense to go for it all, go for high scoring, go for it, big weeks. And sometimes it says, hey, you get leagues that are really wonky, and you're like, I just got to score like bare minimum every week and I can win because my team's not going to be super up or down, but I can like be right in that mix. What do you think, Toast?
Yeah, yeah, you hit it on the head. There's no right way. It's really all about having a strategy, having a pregame plan, and really coming into the draft, sticking to that plan to the point where you can't stick to that plan anymore. And as I saw you go defenseman, and you went defenseman heavy even a little bit earlier than I thought you would have, then it forced me to say, okay, well, I'm ditching the defenseman spot. I'm actually going to go win other positions on the board, and then I come back and say I'm going to go ahead and go banger heavy with the other points, because we get 0.25 for the block, 0.25 for the hit. And if I can just maybe win those quote unquote categories, and those wouldn't a category, would just been a head to head, I feel like I can make up a little bit of ground. So you have to have a plan, but you have to stay a little bit flexible. And I know it sounds a little, like, hey, Toast, you're talking on both sides of your mouth, but it really is that way. You have to do your preparation up front, and you really have to be prepared to pivot when needed. Now, JT, I want to ask you before we wrap this up. Right now, playoffs, you're going to take three leaders, or the top three from this division here, to kind of make the playoffs. If we're not wanting to count a wild card and stuff, okay? Who do you like in this division to finish top three? Which three teams do you like in this division moving forward?
So for me, I just feel like Colorado has a ton of talent. They're a really good team. Like, I just think everything that's happened, all the injuries, they've kind of pulled it together after maybe not the greatest start ever from what we were expecting out of them.
Yep.
I just like this division a lot. Winnipeg, I just always feel like, because of the goalie play, we know, and we've seen it time and time and time again, if you can just get into the playoffs, if you can get a hot goalie, you can go deep. And so that's where if Winnipeg can figure out how to get in, I like Winnipeg just because I
Mhm.
think they're good. And then we've talked about it all year. I just think Dallas has the most firepower. I feel like they're, overall, they're just a juggernaut that has played solid this year, but they haven't played great, which I think is scary.
Yeah.
If a team like that hits their stride when the playoffs start, if I'm the rest of the NHL, I'm nervous. I'm real nervous, is that this team hasn't played their best hockey by the time they get the playoffs. So those to me are the three most dangerous teams in this division. I know right now, I think Dallas is first in the division, Colorado's second. I think Dallas has 44 points. Colorado is second, 44 points as well, but just behind them in the percentages. And then Winnipeg with 43. I actually was surprised how well Nashville's played. Arizona, to me, has been the
Mhm.
surprise.
Yes.
They've been the absolute surprise. I mean, this team I thought was left for dead. Everything that's gone on there with the ownership and the arena, it just feels like a nightmare situation that everyone's waiting for it to end. and then somehow this team comes out and plays fairly well this year. It's kind of
Yeah.
blown my mind. St. Louis got off to the worst start. I mean, just horrible. They looked awful. They have started to kind of look
Uh-huh.
spicy lately, like they're going to fight it out a little bit. Minnesota's been the biggest disappointment in this division by far, I think. And then Chicago, they're in dead last. We knew they were going to be in dead last. Everybody knew it, but
Mhm.
we've talked about this before. This team has shown fight. They have played teams tough. They haven't just folded and given away games. I've been really, really surprised with the way the Blackhawks have played. For a team that has 21 points and is 10-22-1, they've looked way better than that record as far as like the way they are competitive in games.
Yes.
So to me, Minnesota by far the most disappointing team in this division. St. Louis, we didn't expect a lot, but they're playing a little bit better. Arizona by far is outplaying their expectations. But if Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg gets in, Winnipeg's the team
Yeah.
I'd be real scared to play. I'd be real scared if they slide in as a late seed and you're a home seed and you end up getting them and you don't have great defense and goalie play. I'd really be worried about playing the Jets.
Yep, agree. And they even got a good backup goalie, Boursois. I mean, he came in and played a couple games in the last week, and I picked him up one time, and he had a 34 save game. I only gave up one goal, scored me a ton of points. They're just a good organization up and down. I really like Winnipeg. I'm with you. Winnipeg is the dark horse, so to speak, in this Central Division, where I wouldn't really want to play them. But let's look at how deep the division is. After those three teams, the four top wild card teams are all Central Division teams.
Yep.
So I mean, it's very, very deep. It's a really deep division, and I think you hit it on the head with Minnesota. Minnesota is starting in their act together. They're actually only right now actually running a -3 on the goal differential. They've made up a lot of ground there. They're over 500, 15, 13, and 4. They have not played well. Okay, so their goalies have been awful. They're starting to actually play better with Gustafsson and actually Forey as well. So I really like. I'm interested to see what Minnesota's going to do. But JT, what do you think about you and I maybe pivoting over and giving a little bit of an Atlantic conference, either discussion or draft or something next week, and we'll check it on your Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, I like that idea. Let's we're gonna jump in and hit up all these teams. Toast, you're gonna post this draft board on your X
Yes.
page at Toast Clark. So check that out if you kind of want to see where we took. For people that are still asking, like, why would you guys do a 2-round or a 2-team mock draft? We're just talking about where we value these players, where we like them, kind of draft back and forth is kind of fun to see where guys go, where we're like, oh, maybe we didn't like that guy. Oh, I should have taken him in this spot. So we just kind of want to see where we're at, how values have changed from the beginning of the year. So we're going to keep doing this the next couple of weeks just to kind of see where we're at on these values, on these redrafts. And then obviously, as we get going the rest of the year, we'll be kind of be pumping out the rest of the content. And then off season, we'll give you all the rankings, all those things, but we're trying to bring you a little bit of everything here: dynasty, redraft, salary cap. If you haven't listened to some of our past episodes, go back and check some of those out. Even though some of them are a few weeks or months old, they're still relevant episodes, depending on what type of league you're in. So make sure you go and check those out.
Yeah, and when you do, just a reminder to everybody, we really appreciate everybody listening, and really make sure to get on YouTube on the JT Brew, Stu JT Brew channel, and give us a like, smash that like button, and also maybe give us a retweet or a like there on Twitter as well as we post our episodes there. Any support you can give us, I think that we're putting out a pretty good podcast, JT. Lots of good content. We're bringing a lot of energy. Now it's just a matter of making sure people know where to find us so we can actually build that community.
Yeah, and any topics you want us to talk about on the podcast, hit us up. Yeah, as anyone who's listened to us, we don't stick to the one same thing every week. We do a little bit of a mix up all the time. So whether it's gambling content you want to talk about, whether it's trade content, you want to talk about a bunch of different trade opportunities, whether you want to talk about salary cap, league, dynasty, redraft, all that stuff. We play it all. We do it all. So you just let us know what you want to talk about. We have no problem busting out an episode on that. So we appreciate it. So we're at the 45-minute mark. I've somehow made it through without ruining everyone's eardrums with my coughing fits. So I probably should call it quits before I do so, Toast, but I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being here. We're going to keep and continue this series over the next couple weeks. So we appreciate everybody joining us. Have a happy new year. Be safe. Thanks for listening to us on the stew. Make sure to check us out on the YouTube page, but also wherever you listen to podcasts, go download us, subscribe. So every time we have a new one, it pops up and tells you it's in your inbox and where to find it. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks. Have a good one. This was the stew.
You up on trades and why you move. You ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing. Racking up points makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release. We started with the mock